Rumors spreading round in that Texas town.
Hey Mike, I understand that a gimme is in golf is when you can. It's between the end of the golf club and start of the handle grip, but you don't have to knock it in. That you just get a gimme, and you're pretty close looking there. Is that a gimme, Mike?
Let me measure and we'll see. Nah, that's not a gimme.
No?
Looks like I'm going to have to put it in.
Okay. Hey, welcome to the Mikey, Man, and Randy show again.
Hey there.
Hey there. Hey there.
Hello.
We're here at...
I'm Mikey Man.
I'm Randy Man. We're here at the Grand National Golf Course, Robert Trent Jones Golf Course, on a beautiful, almost spring kind of a day.
We'll use our telestrator here creatively during the course of the day.
All right.
Like that. That's a telestrator.
Telestrator. Last week we talked about marketing your vocational expert in case management business. This week we want to deal a little bit about what happens when you get some cases, when you actually have to prepare the case and get ready to go to court if you're a vocational expert.
Wouldn't it have made more sense for us to do marketing out here on the golf course?
I think marketing would have fit real well. I'm not quite sure how we're going to make golfing and preparing the case thing fit. Are we going to do that?
Do we have to?
No, we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that at all.
Golf is like, well, you could say golf is like life.
Is that
in this
right?
case, we'll say golf is like vocational expert work.
Everything goes in the tube?
Yeah, it does.
Goes down the drain?
You shoot for par, but every once in a while you're going to have a bogey or double bogey.
I like it.
You know,
that's a good analogy.
You get lucky every once in a while.
I like it. That works.
But, you know, we say, I mean, really a lot of business does get done on the golf course. I mean,
yeah.
That's one thing. It's, you know, all that's good about America, apple pie, and all those kinds of things, and it's good for local commerce.
Right. Good for what ails you in Alabama.
It sure does.
It's also for those of us in our retirement system, we're very happy to have this golf course. Well, let's just think about, you get your first referral, person calls you, attorney, let's say, calls you, and you've got your first case. Sort of how do we handle it? And I want to mention one thing that I do, just because I've only started doing this the last year, and it's been helpful, and that is, if I get a call, which is one of those things that doesn't happen often, but when I do get a call, I've gotten where I sit in front of my computer and I type down what we talk about in the referral call. And it's amazing how that's helpful. Now, they always ask you in court, when's the first time you were contacted, and what did they ask you to do and say? Well, sometimes by that time I don't remember, I've lost it, but at least for most of the cases I've got that initial contact, so when I go to see the person, I have some information to go on.
And then the second thing you do after you type it into your computer is you ask the lawyer if he wants to go play golf.
Yeah. Oh, that's it.
I just did a segue.
That's just a segue back to golf.
I did.
You know, I mean, you talk about that. I don't really play that much, but I am sure that there are people that do hustle cases by going and playing attorneys golf or referral sources golf.
Sure.
I'm sure you do that, as a matter of fact. Seems like I heard that you did that.
I do, yeah. And see, the benefit that I bring to the marketing / golfing thing is that I'm such a bad golfer.
Yeah.
That I don't ever show up anybody, and so they feel real comfortable sending me referrals. But I mean, truthfully, you learn a lot about people playing golf with them. You get out on the golf course with them, you can find things you would never find out about them in the office, and they find out things about you too.
I would think they would say something like, "This guy's such a loser on the golf course. Why would I pay him money to help me on anything?" Or
they might say, "He's such a loser on the golf course. God, he must be good at something."
It's something. Well, that may be. That may be. He's got something in his background.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you got in the case. You made your first note. Then what?
Well, you try to decide what kind of services are going to be needed.
Okay.
Based on the referral information that you get, and then once you decide the type of case it is and what's going to be needed to answer the questions that are being asked, then you decide, are you going to do testing, or are you just going to do an interview, or is it, you know, those sorts of things. And it's kind of at the point that the first call comes in. I mean, the world's wide open. It could be anything. It could be I mean, I've had people who are already deceased, that were sent to me. So
They called you?
They did call me, yeah. And,
That's what you call a dead practice, isn't it?
It was, yeah. But sometimes we're asked, for example, if this person had lived, what would their wage earning potential have been for the remainder of their life, based on some factors like did they go to college, things like that. You look at the parents, do things like that. But the main thing is when the first call comes in, you either want to be able to give them a response back to, okay, I know exactly what we're going to do, and this is how we do it, or that's a kind of a complicated question. I need to research that, and I'll get back to you. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Let me give you an example. I got a perfect example. I got a call a week or so ago, and the lawyer said, I want to talk to you about this case. Said the person was working in this factory, local factory, and they changed their job a little bit, and they got in a room that had a lot of oil in the air, and they've developed what has been called occupational asthma. All right, so he said the person had to leave that job, can't work there anymore, but we think they can work, but they just can't work in that environment. So is there a vocational loss? That was the question to me. Or can you make a vocational loss out of that, or is there a loss?
And what did the great Swami say?
I said, at my hourly rate, I guarantee there's a loss.
Except to me. For me, there's going to be a gain.
That's right. There's no loss. I will not suffer a loss in this case. That's how true that is. How true that is. Yep. Well, now I have had cases, just to defend my own honor and record, I've had cases where...
Don't bother.
Don't bother now? Okay. I've had cases where they said, can you help? Can you do something with this? I said, I can't do anything. I'm sorry, you don't have enough. Don't waste your money on McClanahan or me or anybody else. You don't have enough here to make it worth your money for our time. Right. So I've done that too. Not many. I don't do that often. No. Because I can be creative about coming up with a loss, but that does happen. All right, so you get a referral, you make a note about what it is, and then you make some decisions about what you need to do, like see the person. Yes. Yeah. Do you always see people?
Almost always. Almost always.
Okay.
And if I had to strike a rule, I would say if you are unsure, I would err on the side of caution, and that would be seeing the person. I think it's much more effective to render testimony or have an opinion if you've actually seen the person, if you can.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's impossible to do that, but my preference is to always see them when I can.
I heard an interesting thing with that in some life care planning training that we had. Some of the folks that worked just the defense side said that they could not get permission from the plaintiff or the plaintiff's attorney to see the person. So all they had to go on was the record, and they looked at the plaintiff's life care plan or work, expert witness work, and that's so they were real excited, according to these folks, when they got a expert who did very descriptive information so that they could go on that because they couldn't see the person themselves. So I guess you can do this without seeing people.
You can, and the other thing you can do, just dovetailing onto the life care planning.
Right.
Sometimes when I'm on the same side as the person who did the life care plan,
okay,
but they may not have put in wage loss analysis.
Okay.
And I'll be asked just to come in and do that small piece of the analysis. And
okay.
And in that case, when there's a rehab person already seen them, and especially in a catastrophic case, I may not necessarily need to see that person.
Okay.
For testing. It may be just real obvious that what their wage earning potential is.
Well, one of the things, of course, that's true if you have a death case, but one of the things I'm aware of is that when you go to court, you just sound more credible if you've seen and spent time with the person.
Definitely.
And the way you fudge your hours. 5 hours. I was with them 5 hours, Judge. I promise.
Well, you can always charge more if you see the person. Otherwise, you're on an hourly clock that reflects just research. And to me, that's really hard work.
That is hard work.
If you're up at 4 or 5 hours.
I noticed that some of the big guns in these fields, I'm not thinking Paul Deutsch in particular, but some of the folks that do a lot of extensive work in this area all have research assistants. So they like to turn it over to somebody. I'm sure they charge the research assistant fee, which is whatever they charge, but they like to turn it over and let somebody else do that kind of work, detail.
The grunt work.
The grunt work. Yeah. We just like not the grunt work. We like the smile and putt work.
But if you're new in this game, I would strongly encourage you to do the grunt work yourself.
Oh, you have
because to really learn it, you just have to do all that kind of menial stuff. So
that only makes sense today. All right, so we get a referral. We figure out kind of what we're going to do, and for most of these people, we're going to see them. So then that brings up the next question: where am I going to see them?
And when.
And when.
Yeah,
and when.
Yeah.
The where is harder for me than the when.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Either one of those. I have a friend who's an attorney, and he said when he started his practice that he met everybody at the Waffle House at the corner nearest them and saw them all at the Waffle House. It was great. Didn't cost him anything. But most of us, we got to figure out a place we're going to see them and then set up the when. What's the when problem?
What's the
What's the problem with the when?
Well, what you want to do when on the when issue is, and this is a significant question when you get the referral. One of the basic questions I always ask is there a trial date set in your case?
Good point.
Because if there's a trial date set and it's during spring break and you're
Right.
going to the islands for spring break, you don't want to take the case,
Right.
Or you want to make some decisions about it. You want to tell them the truth. So that's
Right.
the first thing.
Right.
And then you back it up from there. When is the discovery cutoff?
Right.
So then you know when your report has to be in.
Right.
For those of us that have deadline-itis, you want to know what your deadline is.
Right.
So you kind of back it up that way.
I actually probably have given up most of my business for those very issues. The main one being, they'll say, well, I'll say, well, the same thing. I'll ask them about when the trial date is, or do they have a trial date? That's what I usually say. Do you have a trial date? They say, well, yeah, it's pretty close. And that's the point. I say, well, you need to call this McClanahan fellow because I can't do close. I've got too much booked up. I'm a couple of weeks out, so I lose business that way. But so what?
Well, being busy is a good thing.
It is good.
People keep calling you when you're too busy to take their calls.
I don't know. I used to take all those. They said the trial date's tomorrow. I said, well, can we see them this evening?
Get them over here.
Can you get them over here this evening? I mean, I've had them just about that close because attorneys are like some of the rest of us. Their case, they get material and they poke along with it, and that goes on for however long. And then all of a sudden, they got a trial date, and the judge won't bend, and they got to have it like in a week or two. Anyway.
Yeah. In one of our, I think the last podcast, I talked about a case that I had, and it just where I was assigned the vocational loss, and it's kind of interesting because they had done a life care plan on this guy.
Okay.
And he had catastrophic brain injury, and the lawyer, they figured that they'd covered all the bases until they got close to trial, and they all sat down and were looking through the file, and they realized that even though it was a foregone conclusion, whether or not the guy could work, obviously he could not.
Right.
It was not something that they had evidence of. They needed somebody to come in and actually say it. They'd get in the record.
Really?
So that's what I did.
So they did a Google search for 100%?
Yep. Yeah, they did.
100% loss, and who turned up?
Bingo!
Oh, how true, how true. And did you, well, let me just ask. I mean, I want to be objective here. Did you find this person had 100% loss?
I did.
Oh,
amazing.
Oh, big surprise, big surprise. How did that happen? Yeah, well, but you didn't have 100% loss, as I understand.
Oh no, I gained.
You
I
gained
a lot.
100% gain. Okay,
Yeah.
well that's
It was a good
important.
case for me.
All right. So we got a referral. We asked these questions. We schedule a time. We got a where. We got a when. Then what?
Okay, on the scheduling the time. I mean, in
Okay.
terms of just the nuts and bolts,
Okay.
I normally will ask the lawyer. When we get the time frame and all that, and
Right.
all that. But I normally will ask the lawyer to make the contact with the claimant to let them know that either I'm going to send a letter to them,
Right.
or I'm going to be calling them, or they haven't called me, or something. But a connection from the lawyer to the claimant, or through the network of lawyers, needs to be made so that the claimant, if you're going to be seeing that person, knows who you are and what you're about and all that. Because people
Right.
who are involved in litigation are
Right.
very suspicious of anything that they're not expecting. I mean,
Well, they should be. They
yeah.
should be. They don't. Oftentimes they'll come to my office and they'll say, they'll think I'm from the other side, or the insurance
Right.
company, or their employer. And of course I might be, but I don't tell them that.
Right.
I'm your friend.
Yeah, trust me with everything.
Trust me.
Yeah.
Just tell me. No, understandably so. And so you have to explain that you've been hired by their lawyer, and it really is helpful if they make that contact and tell them first.
Right.
One of the things we did talk about, though, that sometimes happens in between those stages is requesting a retainer. Do you do that?
Well, normally I don't. In a traditional sense, what I do tell them, I have a letter, sort of a form letter that I send to them, and I tell them that they don't get a report from me at least until I get the money.
Oh, okay.
I don't surrender the report. Now,
Oh, that's
sometimes
interesting.
I've gotten the retainer up front if I've had problems with them in the past, or and I've required it of people before.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say I don't. I mean,
Yeah.
my actual standard is that I would require a retainer, but a lot of times it's hard to get.
Okay.
Especially if it's moving along pretty fast.
Yeah. I've changed my tune on that only because probably I've gotten stuck more than you have on not being paid.
No, I have. No.
But I've just gotten, and I vary it. If I've got somebody I've worked with and I trust them, I know them, they're good people, I don't ask them for a retainer. We just,
Right.
whatever. But if it's somebody I don't know or they've gone out on their own,
Yeah.
red flag, I'll say I need this much money, and I try to make it about what I think the case is going to cost, maybe a little less, but close to that. And if they don't, I've lost some cases. I've had some people not follow up, send retainer, not do anything. But that doesn't happen much. Usually if they want your service, they're going to pay you. And they're used to getting retainers. They understand the idea of it. So usually they're going to pay you up front if they have to. And they'll send you a check. And I honestly don't like to see the person until I've seen the check.
Yeah.
I've gotten any more where if I'm requesting a retainer, I'll say, well, when I get the medical information, I'll start looking at it. Send me that in the retainer, and then I'll call you, and we'll schedule your client. So, that for me, that works pretty well. And particularly with the people. If you've been working with somebody 20 years and you've done all these cases, you're not going to hit them up for money up front. I'm not.
No.
People do. I'm not.
No.
And they get a little offended if you do. Well, actually, we did one time. I had an associate, and I said, okay, I'm tired. We're going to get a retainer out of everybody. That one of my best folks called. And for some, I don't know how it worked out. He talked to him. Maybe I said, call this guy and set this up. And he asked a retainer of this guy to work with, honestly, over 20 years. That guy was so offended. I went, it took me a while to calm that one down. But for most people, it's not an issue. And the good issue is you got your money up front. They can chase you. You don't chase them.
And I've never had a problem. I've had lots of problems with getting people to pay.
Right.
I've never had, or I've rarely had people complain about what my bill was and want money back.
Right.
And I've never had anybody actually threaten suit or anything like that over the bill if they've already paid it.
Right.
That whole thing about possession being 80% of the law.
Oh, you're
Once
exactly
you have
right.
It's yours.
Matter of fact, I remember a case a year or two ago when I owed the guy, $70. So I owed him some money back, and I said, I'll send you your money. He said, no, we got it settled. Don't worry with it.
Right.
And I guess what happens for them is it comes out of trust accounts that they have and whatever, and it's about as easy just to write that off and not try to get it back in.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's see. We'll think here of what's going to be the next step.
Oh, yeah. I enjoyed playing the background, didn't you? That was good.
That was a good little respite there.
Well, you had your long game was really working today.
I thought it was.
Looking good.
If I hit off the woman's tee, I don't do too badly. There we go. I forget where we were before we had to take a little emergency break.
Yeah.
No, we're talking. I know where we're at.
It was a subpar presentation.
It was subpar,
yeah.
I thought, to this point.
Yeah.
It's bound to get worse, though.
Yes.
One thing about two of us, you can count on it getting worse. All right, we got us a case referred. We got us a retain. How about a contract? Some people use a contract. Do you do that?
I do not.
I don't either.
Well, I think if you get your money up front, everything's going to be fine. I think the only times that you're going to have problems where somebody might be demanding money back or something like that would be if there's an ethics issue that's raised, where you're kind of really out of line. I've never had that problem.
If they don't like your opinion.
Right. Now, I've had cases, this is another one where the outcome wasn't as expected, especially on the plaintiff's side.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've had lawyers ask me to reduce my fees, that kind of thing. I've never had a defense lawyer ask to do that because they're always spending somebody else's money.
They're spending insurance company money usually, so it doesn't come out of their pocket. And I've had a few ask me to cut my fees. They said they had a lot of expense and they lost money or didn't win the case or whatever, which is problematic because we don't get paid extra if they do win.
Exactly.
We have a set fee. That's kind of an ethical importance that we maintain a set fee and that we charge everybody the same.
Well, one of the things and to be honest, I don't always cut it. I do sometimes, but it just depends on the situation and where I think there might be some like padded billing in or something like that, or if I just like it could be a variety of different reasons. But one of the sort of the logical progressions that I go through with a lawyer is I explain to him, I say, well, let me ask you something. you're saying that you think this would be a $100,000 case would be a good outcome, and he goes, yes. And I said, well, what if you get $500,000? Are you going to pay me more?
Right.
Well, truthfully, I've been on cases just like that where the $100,000, $50,000, or nothing was expected, and they got $500,000. I've never had a lawyer
offer you extra.
Offer me extra money.
Would you take it?
No.
No.
No. Now, unless I had a lawyer send me an extra, and it was kind of like a bonus check one time, and he explained to me that there were things that I didn't really charge him for, and I should have, and everybody else was, and
that makes sense.
He wanted me to have it, and I took it.
Yeah.
But it was just because I worked a lot harder on it than my bill represented.
What about that free membership to the country club golf course?
I'll take those anytime.
You'll take
Auburn
that.
football tickets, I'll take those. Super
Okay.
Bowl tickets.
Okay.
You can buy testimony for Super Bowl tickets.
Super Bowl tickets.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That,
well, Final Four. I could be swayed for Final Four tickets.
Well, that'll work too. I did have a guy one time, and honestly, the fellow was so sleazy, he had already had an ethics charge, and I ended up taking him to the Bar Association. But anyway, as I was doing my thing and putting it together, and he talked to me, he said, now listen, there'll be a little something extra in this for you if we win. And I'm like, no, that's all right. Just, pay my bill.
Right.
If you win or lose, just pay my bill. I'll be happy. And I was when I finally had to take him up on another ethics charge, and he paid his bill before he got charged. Those things happen.
Well,
but some people, at one point, some people do require a contract, and I think the ideal thing about that is then there's no misunderstanding. If you go to court, if you're not being paid, if you've got to recover that money, then you got something to fall back on. The other thing I've used is the person's letter. I like it when they send me a letter. Here's here's a retainer in this case, and here's these medical. Because at that point, I feel like that's about as good as a binding contract.
It is. Really. I agree with you. A lot of times on unknown referral sources, and there's some logistical problems with getting signatures and all that kind of stuff. The thing that I've asked for is a letter.
Yeah. Confirming
everything, and if they haven't paid it yet, exactly when they're going to pay it by the letter.
That would work because in Alabama, and each of your states may be different, but in our state, an oral contract is just as binding as a written contract. And that's more than an oral contract when you've got it there in writing where they retained your services. So at least that helps out a little bit. I always hate it. Every once in a while, I'll get an attorney they'll send me something. They'll call, we'll make the referral, then they'll send over the information, and it either they have a runner bring it over in an unmarked thing, or it comes in the mail with no return address and there's no cover letter, and then you get looking around later to bill them and you realize you don't know their address, their phone number.
And it's not anything they've sent you.
And they haven't sent you anything. And they, you might think, well, they're being sneaky, but usually it's just they're in a hurry to do it. That's what it amounts to. But I've had that several times where I have to scratch around for get an address. Thank goodness I did that this morning. Thank goodness for computers. You can get on the internet and you can Google just about anybody's name in their city, and it'll pop up an address for you.
That really helps. Yeah.
Okay, so we're through contracts. Let's say we got it set up. You're going to meet. It's a personal injury case. You've been retained to find out if there's any dollar losses or expected future losses on the person. And so you set up for 9 o'clock in the morning. 9 o'clock, they show up at the gas station. Waffle House, your office, whatever you're using, meet you at a certain road intersection out in the country.
Yeah.
What next? What do you do next?
Now, one of the things that I do that's a little bit different, and as a private sole practitioner, I think I'm a little different from most, even from you in this area.
I know
anyway.
you. I know you.
But I do more testing than most people do.
You do?
In terms of individuals. But the thing that I also do that I like to do, I don't always get a chance to do it, but I have a form. It's a 9-page form that I developed where I'm just asking a lot of different questions from people.
Is this part of your unit billing?
This part of my unit billing.
That's right.
But I send them the form. I send them a cover letter. See, this is all easy because it's all on the computer now. I just change the name and stuff. But I have a cover letter that says, okay, you're going to come in for an evaluation. Here are the things that an evaluation entails. And then,
I like that.
And I tell them how.
So they're not scared when they get there that they're going to lift weights or get shots.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I tell them that they're going to be with me for several hours, and so that helps them in terms of because a lot of people can't drive. You know, they have somebody that has to drive them there.
Right,
And
right.
if they're coming from out of town, they need to know, you know, the person is going to be able to go shopping or, you know, hang around or do whatever.
Right.
So it tells them how long. And a couple other things I always tell them in the letter. One is if they take pain medication that causes them not to be attentive, to avoid it as much as possible. But I also have the qualifier that if they're not sure if they can avoid that medication, to talk with their physician. That's the first thing, because I've had a few people that would come in that were zombies and I couldn't test them, and they still had to be tested, and
Right.
so we'd have to reschedule and all that. The other thing is, it's amazing to remind people to bring eyeglasses for reading.
That's always a good one. You know, I keep a couple of pair of those just for that purpose.
No kidding.
I've got a couple in my testing kit, 2 different strengths, just for that reason.
That's brilliant, because what I have found without exception is that people who tell me when they show up and they'll say, I didn't bring my reading glasses, I can't see this.
Right.
Without exception, at least that I can remember right now, is that even when they have their glasses, they still can't read. It's always happened.
That didn't help them much.
Yeah, we'd go get them or something like that, and they still couldn't do anything.
Now, I changed my tune on that one. I think I'd say, well, here, take my reading glasses, and I'd give them to them. I'd say, here, take these reading glasses, and they'd take mine, and then I can't see the test thing to read the test.
So
we're passing
right
the glasses. It doesn't work. It's easier, cheap enough to have a few pair.
But tell them to bring the eyeglasses and
Good
cushions for if they're going to sit for a while.
Donut if they need it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that helps. And then I put the form with it. And the form, there's 2 reasons I do the form with it. It has things like their work history and medical history, things that are related and unrelated to their injury. And I'm happy to share that form by email or whatever.
We'll be glad to give you a copy at $5 a page. And just
right. It's gold. I tell you, it's gold.
That's right. We'll make you one.
And so, but I send that to them because one of the things that it does is that it orients them to what it is that we're going to be doing, and it cuts through a lot of stuff. I've spent as much as an hour with people at the beginning of the day when I didn't send the form out of the cover letter, with them telling their story. It's like they feel like they have to tell their story.
Well, they want to. I think it's almost therapeutic for some people to go back, to have someone listen to them, to have a doctor listen to them.
That's right.
As they tell what all happened and how they were wrong.
Right, exactly right. But truthfully, all of that is irrelevant as far as what we do.
Right.
And so if they get the form in the mail ahead of time in the cover letter, they sort of have an idea, and
it's a great
we usually
idea.
don't spend that much time with sort of they're having their day in court, so to speak.
So just give me an idea, and I'll, about how long you spend 5-10 minutes with a person. how long you go through an interview? I assume this is part of your interview. They fill the form out, and then you're going to talk to them about it.
Right, that's right.
Okay, how long do you spend doing that? Just kind of an average.
30 minutes to an hour.
30 minutes to an hour.
I go over it with them because I clarify things. Okay. Because the form asks them a lot of questions and everybody, if you filled one out yourself, or if you filled one out, you'd go, I'm not really sure what you're asking me here.
Oh, sure.
I ask them, how much can you lift?
Right.
And so that's on the form, but when I'm talking to them personally, I'll qualify it. I say, well, how much can you lift without hurting yourself? Or what's a reasonable amount? Because we all hear stories about grandmas, running out and pulling cars off of kids and stuff like that. That's not what we're interested in, the day-to-day kinds of things, and that's what I'll ask them about during the interview. Psychological factors, a lot of times I want to ask them more about that in person, but I have a section for it on the intake interview that allows me to get into that information. So
you like to do, probably, if you're like me, let me back up. I don't use a form like you're talking about, but I think it's an excellent idea, and I'll tell you why. Because I'll ask them when they get there, I want to have the dates of employment, employer, duties, and I want to structure that in a very structured kind of way for my own understanding. Well, it's helpful if they would have thought about those dates before they got there. Or I get people who come in and say, oh, I didn't bring my calendar, that I have all that on it. So that might be helpful. I've got a form in my head, and I've just developed it over a lot of years. Matter of fact, you tried to copyright it at one time.
I did, actually.
You did, I know, but I had a little C on my head. It didn't work too well in court. But anyway, I've got this form in my head that I use, and so I've gotten, and you probably do it different, but I'm such a good typist anymore. I ask questions and type in the answers, and I know the order and the sequence, and it lets me go off and explore and come back and either include that or not include it. The biggest thing with all that, when you're doing it just sort of off your head, is people will tend to wonder. Or they'll get, the other day, for example, I had a lady get into all her medical history way before I was ready to hear that. And so finally I just had to get a little flexible. It's okay with me. Flexible, change my, and get all that down, and then come back and put the other stuff up. So just sequencing.
That's exactly right. Because one of the things that I've done, I've noticed, because I have people come in, I have a way and an order by which I want to get the information.
Right.
And if they start jumping around, it sort of disrupts the flow of things. Right. One of the things that I've done, this is kind of, I've actually given them, when that starts up and I can't get them to stop with doing the subtle cues and everything, I'll just reach a point where they kind of take a breath and I'll say, okay, well, let's just go ahead and do the first test.
Right.
And I'll give them a
so you'll take
I'll actually give them a
break.
Test.
Get them off that and then bring them back later.
Yeah, and then they calm down after a while because they come in with a lot of energy and stuff, and then you just get them a little bit tired after a while, and then they're a little bit more manageable. That sounds a little bit cruel, but the truth of the matter is, I know what I'm looking for.
Right.
They don't.
Right.
And so
and
I need to be the one that drives the interview, not them.
People that come in the door tend to be nervous. They're not quite sure what they're into until they get, they don't know you until they get comfortable with you. And most nervous people just talk too much.
That's right.
And like you say, jump around. And if I'm over there typing and taking notes, I wanted to follow a sequence that I can follow. And the thing you just said is so important. You're in charge of the interview, not them. You're the professional in the room. You're the one that's going to structure it. So
I'm impressed that because if I tried doing it the way, one of the reasons why I do it the way I do it is I would forget to ask them a lot of questions that I need to ask them. But you're just blessed with an incredibly good memory and like a steel trap.
What's your name? You know what they say, the memory's the second thing to go. It's unfortunate but true.
Yeah, I wish it was the first. I can't remember what the first thing is. Can you?
I've forgotten now. Huh?
No.
That's my other problem. Huh? Do you take notes?
I take a lot of notes.
Handwritten? You handwrite your notes?
I handwrite. I'm from a technology standpoint, I'm just the opposite. From you, I have everything I do is in paper and pen, at least in the first part of it. I wish I did it like you did because it would make it easier to get the reports out later. But
I'll tell you when I switched doing that, and it part of relates to the way you do it. I used to take notes and handwrite stuff, and I used to form, and sometimes I'd go over the form and I'd write notes on the side of it when I was clarifying things. But when I got done, not with that part, when I got done with the whole case, I dictated the case.
Yes.
And I had somebody that typed it for me, and it worked great. But she died.
Yep, she died for me too.
73-year-old secretary.
Yep.
She died. And at that point, it was like, well, what do I do? And I tried 2 or 3 other folks to do it, like I know you did.
Right.
And
nothing has worked.
I couldn't find anybody that it worked well for. So what I ended up doing was saying, well, I'll just type these, and then I'll convert my type interview notes into reports. And I've just been doing it that way ever since. I keep hearing, though, about people that are using drag and dictate, and they dictate to the computer, and it puts the words up there. I tried one of those programs maybe 5 years ago, and I spent more time cleaning it up than it took me to type it. But I hear they're better now, so that may be a different way to do it.
That'll probably be the next way I'm going.
Oh yeah. If I was going to do something different, that's what I would do. But I've got to be a pretty good typist, so it works hard.
But I'm not. I have to look at the keys and all that.
Yeah.
I'm really bad about that.
Actually, I think I probably maxed out at typing. I think I hit my ceiling, right? I think that was my chosen area, and I messed up not going into it.
And now, let me say this, because the thing about, regardless of how you do it, everything you do is discoverable. So
that means if I make a little note on there, and I make a sticky note, and I said, this is the dumbest, fattest person I've ever seen, that's discoverable. It's discoverable if you leave it in your file. It is. And that includes your electronics things. I mean, you can put it in, you can just keep it on your hard drive. But they can come get it. Ask for it. They can come. They have access to that. Same with your emails. They have access to your emails. And you say, well, I just wouldn't give it to them. Right. Yeah. Now, I will say this. I mean, this is a little bit. I know one of the things that I do is during the course of the interview, if there are things that have nothing to do with the case, but I'm interested in, sometimes I'll put a sticky on the interview form and write a note to myself. Right. And then I'll throw that note away when I finish the interview or whenever. But so I don't leave something like, this is the dumbest. Most ugliest person I've ever seen. Yeah, whatever you've made a note of. Or this guy's got a loser for a lawyer, or something sweet like that. Yeah. I got in trouble that one time because sometimes I put descriptions of the client that I see, I'll write a description, and I don't mean it to be positive or negative. I just want something that cues my memory later, a year later when I'm doing the report, or whenever.
Year and a half.
Year and a half. I want something to cue my memory on it to remind me of the person, but I've also been taken to task by that in deposition. Actually, I was very uncomfortable a time or two. So now I keep things fairly bland, even though I'll try to point out what people wear, what they look like, and just anything that kind of will help my memory. I may not take pictures too, but somehow it's funny about that. For my memory, somehow if I have a descriptors or two that, or they remind me of somebody I know, those are things that just kind of bring them all back, bring them up fresh.
I remember reading a report you wrote that you described a guy as having a Marlboro Man mustache, which I thought, I mean, perfectly, you didn't have to say anymore. I mean, I understood exactly what that meant.
You could see who I was talking about, or that kind of person, right.
I usually put I do put a small physical descriptor of the person, including, of course, gender, but ethnicity is important.
Yeah.
Because maybe I've watched too many of those shows where they have, would you recognize a claimant if you saw him, and you call out the wrong guy, and maybe the wrong.
And you're going, it's just white woman over there, and I said, no, it's this black guy over here.
That's right.
Hey, you've been a little too far away from the case at that point.
So I do put a little thing, how much jewelry they have and where it is, or something, anything that would cue me specifically about that person also.
Well, let me tell you about that. You may be thinking, well, why in the world you need that? You don't have that many cases in a year. Why wouldn't you know that? But I've had cases between 2 and 5 years going to trial, and you get to trial and you're looking around for that claimant, trying to remember, you've seen hundreds of people since, and you're trying to remember which one it is, and you see them and go, okay.
Good seeing you again.
Yeah, that's really,
it's like that aunt that comes to the reunion that you never did, you didn't meet, and and everybody insists that you did, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, The darndest one I had was a girl come in my office the other day and said, "Oh, Dr. McDaniel, you remember me? I'm so-and-so." And I went, "Hey!"
Mulva?
Yeah. Did I know your mother very well? Did I know? And she said, yeah. She said, "You remember you tested and saw me when I was 12 years old?" I said, "My goodness. 8 or 10 years makes a difference."
It does, doesn't it? Especially in the eyes of the law.
Woo, goodness. Scary. All right, so we get the person in. However we tackle it, we are going to do some kind of an interview, or we're going to have some kind of background history about them.
Right. And
is there anything you emphasize in that you like to look for? Oh, you look for everything, but is there anything that specifically you're looking for?
In the early phase of the interview, and it's things that may not matter in the letter of the law, so to speak.
Right.
But I have a question on my interview form. Do you think you can work?
Yeah.
I want to know if they think they can work, whether they can, whether they can work or not is a different matter. And a lot of times I disagree with the person both ways.
Right.
But asking that question gives me an idea as to where they are and how they see themselves.
Right.
Educational background, you always want to be sure to get that.
Right.
Training, military stuff. You need to ask, even though most time it's not relevant, you do need to ask if they have a legal history of some kind. Because there's some jobs you can't have if you have a felony.
I got tagged on that in a deposition where the attorney on the other side said, "Do you know if this person has any felony convictions or spent any time in jail?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't." He said, "Well, wouldn't that be important vocationally?" I said, "Yes." "Wouldn't it be important that you know that?" I said, "Yes." "Why didn't you ask that?" I don't remember. I don't remember. I don't remember. It didn't work. I've been using "I don't remember" a lot. It didn't work in that answer. But now
it depends on what your definition of is.
What is. You better believe I ask everybody about their arrest history, and I tell people right off the bat. I say I'm going to ask you way more questions than you think are relevant here, but there may be a relevance, and I'd rather ask too much than not enough.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think that's very true.
Yeah. Vocational. We're vocational experts, so you better ask lots of vocational questions, what I think.
Employment history, what the parameters were of their job.
Details.
You want to be able to, you want to know if their job history, not just the job that they were working on, if that's an issue at the time that they got hurt, but before that, and were they more of a sedentary type work history or heavy labor, skilled, wage rates, all that kind of stuff is just really important to ask.
I think it is too. Do you go back 15 years like Social Security does, or do you go back their whole work history?
I asked for 15 years, but there are times where I'll get more than that.
Yeah.
You're better off getting more rather than less,
Yeah.
actually.
I don't know why I just always go back, which is, so, I mean, it's amazing to me, I guess because I've been at Auburn so long, I'm a fossil, but it's amazing to me how short-term people are on some of their jobs. I see people all the time, they jump jobs every 6 months to 2 years, so when you're tracing that kind of person back, if it's the same kind of job, sometimes I'll lump them and I'll say, okay, you were a cashier, checker, and convenience. Did you ever do that before? How many times, or which other stores? Or construction people particularly, they're all over the place, different employers.
I have a 24-year-old son who has had more jobs than he has years on the face of this earth.
Is that right?
Yeah, at the age of 24. And so now, though, I mean, the interesting thing about him is if he goes and interviews for a job, he knows something about everything. He doesn't know much about anything, but he knows something about everything. He's got a real broad-based experiential level. My other son's had 2 jobs in his whole life.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how they're different?
Yeah.
All right, so let's just say we got our interview together and we've done that. And you said that you also, early on, you were deciding whether to test or not test or what test. Do you vary your test with people, or do you get the same thing every time?
That's kind of a loaded question. I mean,
it is.
What I'm supposed to say is, I vary it every time.
No, not in a private practice. You're not.
But the truth is,
in private practice, you don't want to vary it too much.
Right. Most of the time, because I'm dealing mostly with adults, and mostly with adults that have work histories, and a bunch of other factors like that. I have a very standard battery that I give, and then there's a couple of tests that I can add to or take away, depending on their functional level, things like that. Now, if I get into other areas like high school students, that's a completely different battery.
Okay.
And I'll tailor make that. And even the interview form, I still send out an interview form for non-disabled evaluations.
Mm-hmm.
But I take out all the stuff about injuries and things like that,
mm-hmm.
or the pointed language. I don't ask them who their lawyer is, that kind of thing on the form.
Right.
But generally speaking, I have a standard battery that's the interview. I'll do an IQ test, and lately that has been the Kaufman Brief Intelligence Test, but I have this Lawson.
Yeah.
I've given the WACE before. I know we can get into some controversy about that.
Yeah, but not being qualified, and not being licensed. I mean, it's not.
But besides that,
it's not a controversy for me.
No problemo. But I've had and then I do achievement testing. I still use the RAT, the Wide Range Achievement Test, most of the time. I don't have the brand new one, but I'll probably be putting that online pretty soon, or bringing that on. I have the MBA that I use sometimes, depending on how much time I have. I mean, use what you. Yeah, it's actually the math. Let's see what it is. The McCarran, no MBA. It's the
Myers-Briggs.
It's not Myers-Briggs.
No.
I use the Myers-Briggs.
Mini battery of achievement.
That's it.
The
mini battery.
The Woodcock-Johnson mini battery of
yes,
achievement.
Yeah. I use that.
I got to switch to that because I'm using the Maxi battery. And
It's been a lot of time.
But the mini is just as good and it's less time.
Yeah. But even the mini is more time than the RAT. I mean, it's not a lot of more time, but it's still more time, and it's a better test actually. The MBA.
I guess it is.
Yeah, since you use it, but
no, not just because I use it. In our study on testing in our test class, the Burroughs Middle Measurement Yearbook says the RAT should probably not be used on anyone over the age of 18.
Yeah.
Whoops.
But if you use that test like I do, then you need to know. You need to be ready to answer questions about it.
Yeah.
When I'm asked, and I've really never had trouble with it. A few times I've had people ask me questions. I pretty much knew it was coming. And,
yeah. Well, the other thing is, it's the most used. The RAT's the most used test in rehab. That's been documented. So, they can question all they want, but you can say, well, this is the most popular, frequently used test in this area in rehabilitation.
And then I'll do I have a Wonderlic personnel test, which was popularized last year during the NFL combines when they had Vince Young and some of those guys were taking the test. The Wonderlic is a test of what I call work-related IQ.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gives a lot of practical situations and you answer accordingly. But it's only 12 minutes long, correlates well with IQ tests, and gives an indicator of the level of employment, unskilled, semi-skilled, or skilled, that the person can learn those tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives it an educational equivalence, or the average, wherever their score is, that it gives an average or a mean of a person's grade levels who had similar scores, irrespective of age. So it gives you some things to, and one of the reasons why I go into all that detail is that this sort of segueing a little bit away, but on functional capacity evaluations, the issue of validity and credibility of the person being tested is raised a lot.
Right.
Well, if I give a battery of tests where I have a lot of triangulation of data, you know, like I've got 2 or 3 sources and they're all intersecting at the right points.
Right. Triangulation.
There we go. We got it like that.
Yeah.
Then I feel pretty secure in my findings.
Okay.
So I can.
So you like the consistency across tests. You
Right.
think most people are going to be consistent across that.
And most of them are, and then the ones that aren't, I like to have an explanation as to
Right.
why, or a possible explanation, especially if I
do too.
believe that the person came in and did their best or did what they could. And so, and most of the time people really do. I mean, there's every once in a while you have somebody that fakes bad, but the problem with that is the people that usually fake bad are not smart enough to do it very well.
That's true. And the longer your
it's real
testing goes, the
transparent.
quicker you'll see that too.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, the harder question is, you interview people, you give them this battery of tests, and then how do you put all that together? What do you do with it?
Well,
Like, how do you make sense out of it all? You've got all this information. What do you do with it?
I mean, the answer to the question is that it's a backwards question, actually, because what you do on the front end.
It's pretty typical of my question.
What you do on the front end is what you want to find out is what drives what you test. And
Right.
so I don't just say, well, I'm going to give you an IQ test and an achievement test and a Wonderlic, because that's what I always give.
Okay.
I say, I want to know whether or not you can be retrained.
Okay.
And if so, what type of retraining can you undergo? Are you a VOTEC person, a 4-year college degree person?
So you're trying to slot them about how high their
Exactly.
achievement's probably going to be based on the skills they have, kind of jobs they've done, education, and so forth.
Yeah, and a lot of times, I mean, we have people in our field or that we see, people that are self-trained or self-taught. You know, you have a mechanic who might be making $45,000 a year or $50,000 a year as a mechanic, who's brilliant when he opens the hood of a car,
Right.
but he can't read or write.
I've seen that.
And so that's a significant finding, because you cannot assume then that person could be retrained in another skilled trade,
Right.
because that's a person that brought themselves up through the ranks. And if they're a little bit older, it's a tough case.
Despite what these computer programs will tell you about, if they've
No.
done skilled work, they can readily transfer over.
That's right.
Yeah. Despite that, you've got to figure out what the person's strengths and skills are. I think I use this example all the time because it happened to me at least once. so it's just stuck in my mind. But I've told my classes about this guy that I tested that was a carpenter. Well, it turned out he had this tremendous IQ and is a math whiz. And we found that out in testing. Well, as we got into it, his parents were university professors, and he had something he didn't do well in school, and so he went into carpentry. He'd been there 30 years. Well, today he's a math major at Auburn University and doing all A's. I mean, he's doing great.
So y'all took him out of a job where he was making a good living.
A good living, right, and put him in college. So
where he's costing his parents money.
Cost him a bunch of money and never make any money as a math teacher. Well, no, actually, he hurt his back and was not able to go back to being a carpenter. So he will end up, I'm sure he will end up being a math professor. I'm positive.
That's a great, I mean, and that's what
it
we
doesn't
want
happen
to
that often that way. It usually is the other way
you-
around. You got somebody that's over.
But you got to celebrate those when they happen.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's what we're
That's
here
wonderful.
for.
But I think that's part of that putting it together. One is I look for consistency, and I'm looking consistency across tests and tests with a person's background.
Exactly.
Those two things. And then I'm looking for anything that gives them an edge in terms of they're strong here, and then trying to use their skills in their past job, any of these tested things, and look at what jobs would be open for them without further training and with further training if it seems warranted.
Let me throw one other thing in, just
Sure.
as an add-on to all that. It disturbs me when I see a report written by another vocational person where the issue has to do with, like carpal tunnel, for example.
Right.
And the person has carpal tunnel syndrome, and they have surgery, and maybe not a good outcome, or maybe they have bilateral, whatever.
Obviously, 100% case.
100% case. But the person doing the testing didn't test their dexterity.
Yeah.
And that's something that's within our field to do. Now,
Right.
we can't make a determination as to whether or not the person has sensation in their hands, or if their hand feels like they're always wearing a glove.
Glove hand. Glove distribution.
Or but I can take a look at their dexterity to find out how quickly they manipulate objects and whether or not they appear to have tactile sensation with their fingertips and all that kind of stuff. Now, having said that, people that I see are normally really slow on any of the dexterity tests, even when it has nothing to do with their type of injury.
I've seen that plenty too.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that reinforces the point you just made earlier was it's handy to have a standard battery you give, but it's also handy to have a few extra things to pull out when you need them. For example, if I'm dealing with a person with not much of a work history, I like to pull out the Holland Self-Directed Search, take a look at their vocational interests, or pull out a dexterity test if that's warranted. But I don't give that normally. I don't give either one of those normally. All right, so we've got our stuff together. We've come up with some conclusions. We've decided about monetary loss. And to do that, it's not too hard because you can figure the jobs they can do. It's easy enough to go on the internet and find out how much they're paid, or go to the employment service listing and see what their starting pay is, or go to the occupational outlook handbook. There's a lot of places you can go. Go to other employers, call around. There's ways to do that. Then most people want a report. Not everybody, but most of these referral sources want a written report.
Yeah, most of mine do too.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be, first of all, a lot of them, they're going to try to settle their case if they can. And it's easier to settle it if there's something they can look at. I mean, that's one thing.
Yeah.
It's also discoverable, and it gets the evidence into the file, so that's a good thing too.
And then one of the best parts is there you've got a summary of everything you did, your thinking, your projections, and a year goes by, 2 years go by, you go to court, and you say, look at it, you say, yeah, I agree with this guy.
This guy's brilliant.
This guy makes sense. I mean, it just is handy to have all that pulled together into one place. So,
I agree, totally.
Well, is that Tommy singing?
Yeah.
It's test time, contest time.
So how many test items did you get out of today's lecture?
Back to you.
How many? How many test items did you have today?
Probably the most of them for the course.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Well, it's either the music and Tommy singing, or they may be calling our tea time. I'm not.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we're due down on the ground.
Yeah, I think we probably got to go down and putt some more.
Let's go putt it around.
All right, we're gonna go putt it. You guys have a good one.
We just toss out a lot of crap to see how well you'll do. Oh, we say all kinds of grand things that don't make them true. Come test time, it all falls on you.
I wonder if there's anything you could have done to make it easier. I mean, you got the putt, but you could have missed it.
No, I meant to.
This actually is our fourth take.
Start over again.
No.
Okay.
Is there anything anything you think you could do to make it easier to get?
Well, I don't know. They always define. Casual golfers always define a gimme as a link from the club head here to the end of the raft there.
Right.
And so, in this case, as you can see, maybe I'm going to just, for the heck of it, move the ball around here, so you can see the link that we're talking about. So this would not be a gimme unless you had special tools in your toolbox.
Oh, the special tool makes it a gimme.
So actually, if we have the special tool, we can have a gimme all the way out to here.
I like it already.
And we need it because we're bad golfers.